If you've thought about doing some interlocking joinery where there's no gluing involved, but you feel like maybe I can't pull it off, or maybe I don't have the right tools, maybe it's kind of complicated or difficult, then if you're in that camp, this is the video for you. In an earlier video, I made this media cabinet. It's made with no glue and no nails or screws. It's just held together by interlocking joinery. But it does have this space here, which was intended to be a wine rack. And I thought for this video, I would make a wine rack also using no glue. And this would be a really good starter project for anybody that wants to get into interlocking joinery, because it's a pretty simple thing to make. And it's pretty cheap, and it doesn't require very many tools. This wine rack has no glue. It's very strong. It's very stable. I can't bend it or twist it. I loaded it up with wine. It's very strong and stable. No problem with it at all. But it's made without any glue. So I'm going to show you how I made this, and you'll see that it's very easy to do, and it doesn't require very many tools. Of course, the great thing about interlocking joinery is that it's reversible. So once you've assembled your piece of furniture, you can always take it apart again. And this is helpful if you want to transport the furniture, or if you want to change the design slightly. Like, for example, if I wanted to change this wine rack and make a couple of the bottom layers a little wider, for example, I could just dismantle these pieces and put in some wider ones and reassemble it and change my wine rack. Or I could make it taller or shorter, or whatever I needed to do. In this case, I can dismantle this wine rack just by nipping these joints like this. You can see how they come apart. These two slots basically fit together. You can see that each slot is exactly the same width as the plywood that I used, which is why this is so strong and so stable when it's all put together. So I dismantled the wine rack into its various parts, so you can see what you need to make. You need to make a bunch of these, and I'll show you how to make these in a second. You need, 2 for each layer of the wine racks. You need an even number. They become even automatically. You'll see that how we make them. These ones have a slot at the top and the bottom to slot the side pieces into. You also need these 2 for the top, which are exactly the same as those, except they only have a slot at the bottom. There's no slot at the top, because this goes on the very top of the wine rack. Then for the side pieces, you need a whole bunch of these sides, which have slots cut in the top and the bottom. And then you need, again, for the bottom of the wine rack, you only need a slot at the top. You don't need a slot on the bottom. And these ones don't need to be the full height. In terms of the sizing, so these side pieces, my ones are 8.5 inches. That's a good size, 8.5 inches. And I made them 4.25 inches this way. So you can make them whatever size you like. 8.5 inches is a very good size that way. That's about 21 centimeters. 4.5 inches this way. The wine bottles are about between 3.25 and 3.75 inches wide. So these would need to be at least 2.5 inches wide. But by making them 4.25, basically mine is pretty generous. Like, it's very easy to get the wine bottles in. They're not very tight. If you want to stack more wine in a smaller space, you can make these less. You can make these like 2.5 or 3 inches wide, up to you. This one here, I've made this one 1.5 inches wide. These ones are 3.25 inches. And these circles here, in my case, I also made them 3.25 inches. So let me show you how I made all these different pieces, and then show you how it fits together. So I made my wine rack out of this, which is 1/4 inch thick plywood that's been veneered with white oak. You can get plywoods veneered with various kinds of hardwood, which are pretty nice. They have quite a nice finish. You can sand them and finish them just like they're real wood, but they're a bit easier to work with, and they're very strong. You could of course use any kind of plywood, and you could use a thicker plywood if you wanted to. You could also get some real wood. This is a piece of paddock, for example, which I've machined down to a thin size. Instead of using plywood, if you want to use real wood and give yourself a bit of a bigger challenge, you could also use some real wood. The way that I made these pieces was I started with a piece of plywood that was this shape and size, and then I used this. This is a 3 3/4 inch hole saw, 3 3/4 inches is the size of a standard wine bottle, like the classic shape of wine bottle. If you have wine bottles that tend to be like bigger at the bottom, you might want to use a bigger hole saw. The bigger wine bottles are 3 3/4 inches. The standard ones are 3 1/4 inches. I use this 3 1/4 inch hole saw to cut these 3 holes, and then once I've cut the holes, I just sawed it down the middle. So that's an easy way to do it. If you don't have a hole saw or you don't want to go buy one, you just find yourself a suitable container and just put the lid down, just draw around the lid, and then cut it with whatever saw you have available to you. These side pieces are very straightforward. All you have to do is cut a rectangular piece of plywood and make them all the same. And there's lots of ways of doing that. I won't go into how to measure and mark and cut things. There are many YouTube videos around about how to do that. But I will show you, because this is the important part about the interlocking joinery, I will show you how I made these slots. I had to make lots of them. All these pieces have these slots, and all of the slots are a perfect fit for the plywood, like it's exactly the width of the plywood. This is the part about the interlocking joinery, is how to make the joinery fit tightly together like that. So that's the really important part of this video, and that's what I'll show you next. The key to making things accurate and repeatable in woodwork is to make jigs, fixtures, templates, things like that, which enable you to do the same thing repeatably. In this case, this is my template. It's actually very simple. It's just 2 little bits of plywood. But these bits of plywood were made in a very specific way to help me to cut the little slots in the top and the bottom of all these different pieces of wood that I show you. So this is how I use these templates. I'll show you how I made them in a second. So I found this just off-cut of wood that's fairly straight. This is just to make things a little faster and a little bit more easy. I'm putting a straight edge and just fixing it down to my worktop like this. Okay. This means that I can now put this up against this edge, and I can also put these up against the edge, and I know that these 2 edges are perfectly lined up. That's the only reason I'm clamping this piece of wood to the workbench. So this piece of wood I made 1/2 inch thick because I want my slots to be 1/2 inch deep. I want them to go 1/2 inch up here, 1/2 inch. So this is 1/2 inch thick that way. I also put a little arrow on it like this here, just to remind me which side of it goes against the edge of the wood. So there's an arrow here. I may not be able to see it too well in the video, but there's a little arrow there. And I marked 2 lines that shows me approximately where the slot's going to be. These don't have to be accurate. What I need to do is make this hard up against this piece of wood, make this hard up against here, line this up with the end, and then I'm just going to draw a line along here. So I'll draw a line along there, which is roughly where these 2 lines are here. It doesn't have to be exact, just approximate. Then I'm going to take my piece of wood and I'm going to turn it around like this, put it this way around, and then I'm going to use this one to draw a line here, which is also going to be 1/2 inch, because like I said, this is 1/2 inch wide. And I'm going to take this second piece and put it here and draw a line. And now I have some lines drawn here, which is exactly where I need to cut out to make a slot here, which will be a perfect fit for another piece of plywood. So the big question is, how did I make these 2 pieces of wood in such a way that when I put one here and draw a line, and then put the other one here and draw a line, and then cut around these 2 lines, I end up with a slot which exactly fits tightly with another piece of plywood. And the way I did that was trial and error. So I put this piece here, which has always been 1/2 inch, and drew a line. I put this piece of wood here, and drew a line, and then the slot ended up too wide, so the plywood was too loose. So I looked at like approximately how much too wide is it, and then I took some off one edge of this piece of wood, and then I got another piece of scrap wood, and I marked it again, and I cut it again, and I tried the plywood again, and I did that maybe 4 or 5 times. Until this piece of wood was exactly the correct width, so that the slot that I cut here is a very tight fit. And that's basically how I made these. And once I've got this set up with this jig, it's a very, very simple jig with just a few simple pieces of wood, but it enabled me to cut all of these pieces here very precisely, and all of them are a perfect fit for perfectly tight fit for another piece of plywood going into that slot. So now you just have to keep doing it. Just repeat it over and over, hold it tight up against the bar, take the thin piece of wood, mark a line, take the thick piece of wood, mark a line, go to the other side, do the same thing. It's actually quite fast really, once you get going with it. Just keep going like that, cutting, marking out the 2 slots on either end of all the pieces of wood. So you can cut these out with a bandsaw if you have one. If you don't have a bandsaw, then a tenon saw will also work just fine. So once you've made all the bandsaw cuts, you need to remove this little piece of wood. I suggest you get like a scrap piece like this, put it down on there, take a very narrow chisel, you know, put the chisel on the line here, and just give it one blow. It's a very small piece of wood. It should come out pretty easily. And then once you've cut it out, you should find that another piece of plywood will fit tightly into that slot, like that. So I've finished cutting out all my parts. I have a lot of these. This is actually one wine rack. This is actually another wine rack. I'm going to keep them separate. I'm going to use my orbital sander to do the sanding. But of course, you know, if you don't have an orbital sander, you can also use one of these kind of handheld sanders that work really well. I'm actually going to use this 220 grit followed by this 400 grit, because this is a veneer. It doesn't have a lot of thickness to it. You can't sand it too heavily. It's already got a very smooth finish. It actually feels really nice already. So I don't think I need to use the coarser grits. I'm going to start with the 220 and I'm going to go with the 400. So I finished all my sanding. Didn't take that long actually. I spent maybe 40 minutes or something, and I've got 2 wine racks. This is all the parts of one. The other one is right over there. So now I just need to do the finishing. I'm a really big fan of these hard wax, the liquid hard waxes like Osmo. It's kind of an expensive finish, but I really like the way it looks. And I usually just put on a pair of nitrile gloves and use a bit of kitchen paper to rub it on, and then the whole lot just gets thrown away, no cleanup. So that's the next step. I really like the way this looks when it's done. It's if I use like a polyurethane type varnish, I find that I get a kind of a plasticky kind of look. I like these hard waxes. I think they have a sort of slightly matte but a little bit shiny. They look very, very natural, and I think it would really work well for this particular project. But of course, this is your project. You should do it whatever works for you, whatever kind of finish you like, whatever kind of wood you like. You can make this wine rack in any width, any height, and you can make any kind of other embellishments you like. I think I'm going to put some. I think I'm going to make some little chalkboards and put one underneath each of the sections where the wine bottles sit, like here, so that I could write on something about each of the wines. So you know, I'm going to do that. But you can do whatever you want to do as a customization to make it your own. One of the main reasons for doing woodworking is so that you can have something unique and tailored to your specific situation. So, you know, it's usually more expensive to make something than it is to go out and just buy it in a store. But when you make it yourself, you get the satisfaction of having made it, and you also get to customize it and make it exactly the way you want. So, I'd love to hear from you guys. If you make a wine rack, I'd love to know what size you made it. I'd love to know what wood you made it from, and any embellishments you did. Like, are you going to put like a little chalkboard like I'm going to do, or did you do something else to make yours unique? So let me know. So to assemble the wine rack, we need to start with these small pieces. They go at the bottom. Then we need to put not this piece that's got no slot, so that one's at the top. This is the other top piece, so they go on last. So take one of these pieces, we just need to line up the two slots, the slot in the side with the slot in the horizontal piece like this, and again on this side. Might require a little bit of tapping because we made them fairly tight. You can tell when you're at the bottom when it goes from being like a high pitch to being a then you know that you've tapped it down far enough. So for mine, I'm making sure that the white oak is at the front and on the insides, because I'm going to put this inside of a cabinet, so the outside edges won't be visible in my case, but obviously it depends where exactly you're going to put this bookcase. This wine rack. This is not a bookcase. Okay, so then we do that, and we put some side pieces like this. And we just make sure we line up the little slots, tap them down. Like so. Okay, and then we just do some more of these pieces, and then we just keep going doing this. Okay, so from start to finish, these two wine racks have taken me, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 hours, something like that. For the chalkboards, I just got some bits of plywood and cut them into a shape, painted them with some black paint. I've got these little chalks here, which seem to write on them pretty well. So now I just need to attach them to the wine racks. So I could place the chalkboard here like this, and we could continue with the no glue interlocking joinery by taking a marking knife and marking around this profile and then very carefully cutting it out so this would like press home into a cutout here. But this doesn't need to be reversible, and it's quite a lot of work to do that, so I think I'm just going to glue them down. So that's it for this video, and hope you enjoyed it. And I hope also you'll go make a wine rack and let me know how you got on. Tell me what kind of wood you used, or what sort of size or shape you made your wine rack, any embellishments you added to it and how you finished it, things like that. I'd love to hear from you if you do make a wine rack, and if you have any other questions or comments, or would like to ask me anything more about any of this stuff in the video, please leave me a comment and I will reply back to you. Thanks. Bye.